If your intent is to build the relationship as part of the corporate sponsorship or corporate partnership, and you're going to make a bunch of decisions all along the way that lean into that. Go into your introductory call with questions. Don't spend the whole time talking about yourself. When you're thinking about your corporate value proposition, what is it that you think that you have to offer the company?
You're listening to The Nonprofit Boost, where Double the Donation and industry leaders share practical tips to help you grow revenue and boost corporate fundraising at your nonprofit. Welcome to the Nonprofit Boost by Double the Donation. I'm your host, Kathleen. Today, we're going to explore a topic that is a true catalyst for major growth. We are talking about corporate philanthropy and how to move from transactional asks to transformational partnerships. Today, our guest is very, very special. We have Heather Nelson from BridgeRaise. Heather Nelson is the founder and president of BridgeRaise, corporate fundraising consultancy that helps nonprofits build values-aligned partnerships with companies. A longtime fundraiser, teacher, and mentor, Heather has supported hundreds of charities to raise more through strategic corporate relationships. She's also a contributor to a women's leadership book, Embracing Ambition. When she's not working, you'll find her among the trees with her dog or cheering ringside as a proud hockey mom. Heather regularly shares trends and resources on corporate partnership through her LinkedIn. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kathleen. Thanks so much for having me here.
We're so thrilled to have you here, Heather. But before we start, maybe you can share a little bit more about how you got into corporate fundraising.
Yeah, it's so fun. Thanks so much. I mean, obviously, we all have a moment where we would decide, at least our path for a little while. And I've been a fundraiser pretty much my whole career. But in the early days, I was one of the people that did all the things. I'm sure many of our listeners are like that, who have marketing and direct mail and, corporate partnerships, maybe a little part of their portfolio. And I was one of those people when I started out. And I did have the call everybody dreams of. I had on my answering machine this call that was hi, I'm calling from a company and a very well-known shoe brand. I won't name the specifics, but a very well-known shoe brand called and they're like, we want to do a big multi-country partnership with you. And I, heard the message and I walked into my executive director's office and I was like, this might be a prank and it might be the greatest call ever. And so anyway, it did turn out to be the greatest call ever. We turned that into a 3-year multi-country partnership. And, I fell in love with this process. That corporate partner was a dream to work with. And they had really looked for an organization, and this will make sense with what we're talking about throughout today, that they wanted to align with based on values that we had put out in the world. And so on one hand, it was this golden phone call, and some people would say it came out of the blue, but I would say we just rebranded our website. We put amazing pictures and stories there. There was all the things for them to see why they would want to make that call. And so we'd done the homework, even though I never dreamed that would happen. And then from there, I've just stayed in corporate partnerships almost ever since. I worked in-house for quite a few years, as you said. And then for the last 10 years, I've been working with my consulting firm, talking about corporate partnerships literally every day, and helping charities with their partnerships.
Oh my gosh, I really love your passion, Heather. And I feel like corporate partnerships really found its way to you. Okay, I think we can dive right into the deep end because the core of what you do is helping nonprofits shift their entire corporate mindset. Heather, the term transactional fundraising, it gets thrown around a lot, but we see this happen constantly in the corporate space as well. How do you define a purely transactional relationship? What are the telltale signs that a development team is stuck in that transactional trap?
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say that, there's no judgment here if you're stuck in this trap, because there can be a lot of really good reasons why it happens. one of the biggest one, which is capacity and time, because making these shifts can take some energy, right? It can take, whether you hire an external consultant or you do training or you decide just you already know what needs to be done and you take the time to do it. It takes time. So some of the signs that we see, or what some of the things that we think about when we think about transactional relationship, is that you don't really know what the company wants or is looking for. You haven't had a conversation. You haven't built relationships with them. And so that might be you filled out a portal and just got a check. It might be you sent in a package and they gave you some kind of investment. Sometimes you didn't even do anything directly with the company. There's another person in the middle. Like you've handed that responsibility off to somebody and they've come back with a check, maybe based on their relationship. And the company doesn't even really know you. So there's like lots of different things. But if I was like looking at an organization and asking that question, I would often see things like sometimes a deck that has a form at the end that they ask a company to fill out, or like a package that has every single detail in it. And, the company is expected to do the work, those kinds of things. There's definitely no integration with the employees, with like a bunch of people. We're not picking up the phone and having conversations if it's transactional.
I agree. Like the human element is really missing there. On the flip side, what does it look like when a nonprofit breaks out of that? How do you define a truly relational corporate partnership?
Yeah. Well, and it's more than just the opposite, right? Like the opposite is the obvious part, right? That there is some kind of conversation, people at the organization. But more than that, I think it really starts with the intent from the start. So, if you go into this whole corporate partnership space, thinking like, how quickly can I get the money? How quick can this be? How easy can I make this? And not easy in that way where it's smooth and frictionless, which we do want, but easy in that we don't even really talk and figure out what each other really wants out of the relationship. Then that is like what we're looking for. So, I really say like from the start, if your intent is to build the relationship as part of the corporate sponsorship or corporate partnership, then you're going to make a bunch of decisions all along the way that lean into that. And that is like how you develop your assets. That's how you reach out. That's how you communicate. It's all of those things. And, most importantly, also, there's power to be held on the charity side. I think, part of a partnership means that you value what you're bringing to the table, and you expect the company to value what you're bringing to the table, and vice versa. So you really need to believe that you are offering something of value, and that mindset really shifts the whole equation when we're talking about relationship first fundraising with companies.
Nonprofits are always being asked to do more with limited time and resources. Double the Donation's virtual summits offer practical insights, expert advice, and actionable ideas to help you grow your impact. Check out the summit calendar and register at doubletheDonation.com/virtual-summits. We'll see you there.
Makes total sense. Intent, value, and effort, those are the really big things. And I think really if our only touch points, as you mentioned earlier, is just like an invoice, it seems like we're just a vendor to them in a way and not a partner. And that cycle is like so easy to kind of fall into, especially around big annual events, which actually leads right into my next question. Many nonprofits only reach out to their corporate contacts once a year when it's time to sponsor the annual gala or golf tournament. How can fundraisers break this cycle and actively engage these partners year-round without it feeling like they're just constantly asking for more and more money?
Yeah, I'm totally going to answer that question, talking about 3 different areas. But before I do, I just wanted to mention that I really loved the research that you guys did about like some of this information and seeing it on like in data that, only a third of charities are reaching out like more than once a quarter, I was like, okay, we need to talk about this because you know what? If you're going to move beyond event fundraising into a partnership, you're going to communicate more often. Like that's, if all you're doing is reaching out when you have an ask and the event is coming up, then you're really reinforcing that idea of a transaction over a relationship. And also you're really narrowing the possibilities for your partnership to like one amount of money related to one event. So if we want to move outside of that event cycle, like area one is your approach to stewardship, which really should involve like an annual calendar of touch points. And that can include and should include obviously the event and the ask, which may be like what we call the culminating moment or like the flagship or the like the star moment of the relationship. But that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be other outreaches throughout the year. And I think one of the real shifts you can make is if you see this company as your partner, then they want to know about other mission-oriented things that are happening throughout the year. So that may mean like when you're mapping your touch point out, look at what you're already producing for your individual donors or for other partners and like tweak it for this audience. You may want to do a couple of individualized outreaches. Maybe there's like an off-season focus group where you're asking questions about the event and like, that would be maybe a natural thing to do before you build the New Year deck or the New Year pitch, so there's some things that I think most of us are doing and we're just not thinking about how we could perhaps use it to engage the corporate partner. And you know what? It doesn't have to be hard. Like it could be like, can I get on the phone and ask you 2 questions? Or could I send like a little questionnaire, that kind of thing? Like, how can you make it easy? I was talking to one of my clients the other day and they do a magazine that has pictures in it. And so like in the off season, they were sending the company pictures and asking them to vote on their favorite. Like easy, right? This is not
adorable.
This is not hard, right? But it made like the pictures are beautiful. It just was like a little like mission moment off season. And so I was like, that I love that, right? It's just a little thing. And so when you start mapping these things out, you can leverage things that you may be doing already.
Yeah, I think it also makes it feel more personal as well, like touching on those kinds of touch points of just images and then vote from these. And if I get some of those, like if ever like I donate and I become like a donor, and I get those asks or I get those sort of like surveys or those questionnaires, I would be elated because that's just so cute. It doesn't feel heavy and it doesn't feel forced in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I love that too. And I think another thing that does, it leads into my second way to move beyond this event piece is when you're thinking about your corporate value proposition, like that term I use to say, like, what is it that you think that you have to offer the company? If what you do in defining that is define it as the event, then of course that's what you're going to put in front of them. But if you put the event inside a bigger idea, then it feels differently. And then the reasons that you're reaching out might be a bunch of things, including the event. And that's where we move from like event sponsor into a partner. And so that's when you might have other activities that are happening throughout the year that relate to the overall partnership. Again, the event may be the big moment, but these other things. So if your value proposition is around like an area of work that you work in, and these are the different things that underpin it, or a change that they want to see in the world, and one of the ways is the event helps fund it, then you're just changing how you're presenting the whole, situation. And that helps, again, you zoom out a little bit from, hey, we want money for this, table topper, or we want, money for this event, and into like, here's all the important work we're doing, and we're going to celebrate it at this event.
Yeah, I love those.
The last thing I wanted to just mention, which I find is like, especially for big organizations, something to really think about, is if you want to keep in touch with your corporate partners year round, recruit other departments into the equation, right? Like the organizations have marketing departments, they have, they have mission people, they have researchers, there's people doing all kinds of things throughout the year that might be interesting to your corporate partners to participate in, like to come to a talk or to, participate in a thing. And if you work with your colleagues cross-departmentally, sometimes you can really lighten your lift in terms of the activities you need to do in your department and share them across the organization. So I really encourage people to be thinking like organization-wide when they're thinking about taking care of a corporate partner.
Love that. I love your 3 points: stewardship, value proposition, and cross-departmental touch points. But I think to make those touch points also really actually resonate, you really also have to know what makes the company tick. In a similar vein, you often emphasize in BridgeRaise that a true partnership requires finding common ground rather than just pitching what the nonprofit needs, as you've mentioned earlier as well. What is your framework for actively listening and discovering a corporation's true philanthropic goals so you can build a strategy around shared values?
Sure. Well, I love this question because like there's sort of like different parts to the answer. And the first part is like, if you start at the end where you've already got everything built and constructed, it's going to be very difficult for you to establish like shared understanding and shared value. And that doesn't mean I want people going into conversations without having any idea what they're going to sell. Like, we need to have some like meat on those bones from the beginning. But it does mean that there has to be real spirit of curiosity from the beginning. And, I joke sometimes about like a sort of a personal story that, I really had a very clear vision of how I wanted to get married and when and all these things. And so before I told a lot of people, I like made a bunch of decisions and told them those decisions as done, and then said, and you can like add in your ideas here. And I'm like, that's not really a very strong partnership. That's like me deciding everything and then giving them a little bit of latitude about where they could join in. And I feel like sometimes we do that in corporate partnership, and sometimes the place they can add in is super tiny. So I encourage you to have like a framework, but also be fairly flexible about, what areas you are willing to be flexible on and what areas you're like, no, you know what, this is a thing that we're firm, like we can't shift on. And if you have that, then you can start at the beginning, which is research the company and get to know enough about them that you can be a part of a meaningful conversation, right? So research is important, and I don't think you need to unearth every little tidbit in their history, but you definitely need to do enough to know what kinds of corporate partnerships they're involved in. Do they like events? Do they prefer, employee engagement? Like, do they have a matching program? Like, what's going on? And then the next thing is go into your introductory call with questions, not only answers, and definitely don't spend the whole time talking about yourself. Like that's just a really bad meeting. You need to tell, so one of the things I get my clients to practice is like, how can they tell just enough about themselves as briefly as possible to open the conversation to the questions? Because the company will almost always say, tell me about your organization. They will almost always say that as the first question because they maybe didn't prepare as much as you did. They may not know you, so they need some context. But if you take the next 25 minutes of your 30-minute meeting, describing all the programs, then you're never going to get to them. So I'm always like, can you like give the most important stuff to them in like 5 minutes? And then ask questions and start getting, and then you can add little bits about yourself in response to like a conversation that's now going to happen. So I really think that's where it comes from. And that ultimately, the only way you're going to find out really their values, their priorities is for them to tell you. You can only do so much research. And at the end of the day, you have to hear from them there was just recently some research done out of the UK on why companies give. And Fireside Fundraising asked a bunch of questions to the corporate side. And they said one of the things that really frustrates them is the assumptions about them that people come to the conversation with. And I thought that was fascinating because on one hand, we want to do our research, but we don't want to assume that every single thing in the research is like rock solid. We want to do enough research that we can like validate the information in questions with them. Because, sometimes that information is 6 months old or 3 months old. But right now, with how often the world is changing, it could be like 2 weeks old and not be accurate anymore. So you really want to get in a situation where you're going in with knowledge, but not the assumption that you know what they want. And ask the question, what is it you want? What is it you're measuring? What is most important to you? Is it employee engagement? Is it, matching funds? Is it a specific impact you're trying to make? Like, get them to tell you what they want, and then you can respond with how that fits with, where you're flexible and where you're not flexible.
Absolutely. Doing that homework is really a non-negotiable, but also flexibility and having those questions in your back pocket is the best thing when you're entering like a meeting like that. And you also, I think when you understand a company's goals, you stop pitching, and that's where you actually kind of start partnering. Right now, one of the biggest goals for any CSR departments is simply engaging their own workforce as well. And our data in Double the Donation actually shows a very fascinating reality. Over 26 million individuals work for companies with matching gifts programs, but the vast majority of those employees have no idea that the programs even exist. So companies are desperate or really willing to activate all of these benefits, and nonprofits are in the perfect position to help them to do it. And Heather, I think that tees up my next question perfectly as well. If a relationship currently lives between just one fundraiser and one corporate executive, to start building that deeper connection, how do we actually begin making a corporate partnership truly relational?
Yeah, I love this. And I love your mention of matching gifts. I mean, there's matching gifts. There's also sometimes donations for hours of volunteerism. Like, these different mechanisms that are in place at companies really do signal what the company cares about, right? Like, it's important for you as a charity partner to know if they have these different programs. They didn't put them in place for no reason. They put them in place because it was important to them. And if you can help them, successfully activate those programs, then that totally makes you a good partner. And I often encourage, when you're thinking about, your communication strategies with the company, you may offer to include some kind of shout out about a matching gift program or a volunteer incentive program to the people when they're with you, right? Like, when there's the perfect time to tell them about it. And, you offer that the email could come from you, or it can come embedded with a story from you. I mean, those are really good strategies, because ultimately what we want when we're moving from transactional into a more partnership is we want to have a relationship that is through as many people as possible, honestly. If you're one fundraiser and you're communicating with one person on staff, that is a very risky place to be. If you have senior leadership that are having conversations, you're having conversations as like the two project managers, and then there's like employees that are involved as volunteers, as event participants, as fundraisers, as donors to your organization. That really just strengthens the whole partnership. And if you can capture in your report back to the company all these different ways that you and the company are integrated, are speaking to each other, how their employees value your mission, well, that really makes such a strong case for them to keep giving to you. Right? For them to keep being a partner, for them to give you maybe more even. So, I mean, that kind of data of like knowing all the employees that are already involved and helping there be more of them, such a big win. Such a big win. And so I do really encourage people when they're thinking about a partnership strategically and moving it from like a one-off annual amount for an event, one of the things we talk about is like, where are the other relationships existing? Are there employees giving, that you haven't like captured all of them in one group to tell the company about? Do they have some of these programs in place that you could leverage for another stream of revenue? And it really does. The data shows that employees are super important in companies' decision making around partnership. And so it's great from that point of view. And it's great from the point of view of you can get more money from a company if you leverage their employees in a really positive way. So, that's the definition of win-win. And that's really, ultimately what we want with corporate partnership is for both parties to be happy. And making a company's employees happy is really a good recipe for an overall strong relationship and partnership.
Yeah, it really does change the game when you look at it that way. And speaking of like multifaceted partnerships and connecting, Heather, we actually connected on LinkedIn. And even something as simple as that, I think, can be an example of like starting a relationship and really building that up. But I think
I was just going to say, yeah, it totally can be. And I love it too from the employee perspective. We've heard from companies more than once that one of the things that makes them the happiest is when an employee talks about one of their corporate partnerships on a platform like LinkedIn. I mean, it just really makes them proud. It's a great signal of a strong partnership. So, I mean, I love building relationships on LinkedIn. I use it for both prospecting and for relationship building, but I'm always looking for those kind of examples where an employee has like shouted out their commitment to a charity that is connected to them through their corporate, entity, because that's a cool next thing that, if you're measuring that, you're really winning.
Yeah. And you just touched on a massive facet of the employee angle as well. How does expanding the relationship to include the company's employees really help shift that dynamic into more of a holistic and sticky partnership?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, like if you're involving the employees, it's definitely going to strengthen your partnership. We see a lot of evidence of like if you can do programs that create ambassadors in companies, then that strengthens it. So there, you can have some strategies around that. Obviously, asking the employees for individual donations can be a strategy. If you're not comfortable with that because of some sort of dynamic at your organization, then getting them to be volunteers or to amplify your message. Even like maybe it's just a question of wanting to spread the word about your organization to more people. And employees, they're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, they're on different platforms, they're out in the world talking about charities and what they do. So, arming anybody who you cross paths with the ability to like amplify your message is another really great strategy. As I said before, like if you can also compile that data and include it in a report, like how many employees at a company are involved with your organization in any different way, then that can really help you. And if you can give them ways to be involved in your organization that are really easy. I mentioned the photo example. We've also had ones where, give advice to a young person. It could be like writing, thank you notes, like, some low lift options for how their employees can get involved in your organization that can really help strengthen your partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that completely changes the power dynamic, and you're just not asking the company for a favor. You're kind of helping them fulfill their own promises to their employees. So as you mentioned earlier, it's a total win-win. So for anyone listening who is having like a light bulb moment right now, let's talk about where they should start. Heather, what is one genuine relationship building outreach a fundraiser can do this week that involves zero asking?
You know what? I can not only name one because I think there are so many easy ones to do. So like share a photo or a story. And honestly, don't overthink it. The reality is like we do want authentic things out in the world. And so, this does not have to be fully polished. It could just be something, really authentic and recent. you could, to the point about the employee piece, you could ask the question specifically about, do they have a matching program? Do they give a donation to organizations where there is volunteerism? Like, ask a question like that about what they are doing. And then that will maybe open a door for another opportunity that you could set up. You could just offer a check-in call and update them on what's happened. I mean, it's, the middle of the year, like, what's update on what's going on, what program initiatives are underway. I would just say, like, as a general rule, if you look at your recent touch points and you have only been in touch with them to ask for money or to report on that money, that is not enough. So you need to come up with some other ways to reach out. And this is, again, where I love LinkedIn as a secondary option. If you don't want to compose an email and you're feeling too much pressure around that, but you are connected in LinkedIn, maybe you could just send them a recent update that your organization has put on its LinkedIn page. Or maybe you could put something on your LinkedIn page and send it to them and say, hey, this is a recent thing that we did at our organization. Something like that. You can make it really low lift if you're just thinking about advancing a relationship and not trying to think, about a huge impact report or a big meeting, right? This is about becoming closer to them and their company, and reduce the pressure. It doesn't have to fulfill some massive goal. It is just a touch point. And I think if you have quite a few of them in the year, then it stops being such a huge thing. Every single one doesn't have to do so much. Each one is a little opportunity to celebrate, to give more information, to make another connection, or to gather another piece of data from them. And you just chip away at all these little things over time instead of putting too much pressure on one. So that's my advice.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So many actionable points. And I really love that you've mentioned to stop overthinking, because we have the tendency to kind of ruminate. Oh, is this something that I'm doing resonating with my audience? But you've also mentioned authenticity. And I really, really love that, because I think authenticity highlights your cause. So that's really just what you need, basically. And you heard it right here, everyone. Heather, I'm sure our audience might want to reach out if they have any questions, or maybe they want to further the conversation. That being said, what's the best way to reach you and BridgeRaise?
Sure. Well, as you already mentioned, I love sharing on LinkedIn. So I am on LinkedIn, and please do follow me there. Also, bridgeraise.com and hello@bridgeraise.com if you have any questions. We do have resources like the top questions that you can use in your introductory call. It's a resource that we share widely. So if anybody wants that, please feel free to email us and we'll send it over. But, I love meeting fundraisers who are doing corporate fundraising. So don't hesitate to be in touch and tell me what's going on.
I love that. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us today and gracing us with your expert knowledge. If you like this episode, share it with a co-fundraiser and don't forget to subscribe. Bye, y'all.
Here's your next steps. Visit doublethedonation.com to explore the tools and strategies that schools and nonprofits use to unlock more revenue through corporate fundraising. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your team and peers.